The sun blazed high above the desert plains, its light spilling over the broken hills and golden grass. The wind was dry, carrying the faint rattle of sagebrush and the smell of dust. In the middle of that endless valley rode a man whose name the townsfolk barely remembered, Eli Ward, a rancher turned wanderer, looking for land that would finally let him stay. He had no map, only a memory of a river that once ran through this part of the territory, a whisper of green in the middle of the red. But as his horse crested the last ridge, he saw movement, smoke, firelight, and people. And then, an arrow struck the ground inches from his boot. Eli didn't move. Slowly, he raised both hands. From behind the rocks, a young Apache woman stepped out, bow drawn, eyes sharp as the desert itself. Her braids swung against a chestplate of leather and beads, and the sunlight carved fire into her skin. "You crossed our land," she said. "I didn't mean to," Eli replied quietly. "Just passing through." "No one passes through here," she said. "They pass away." Her tone was steady, but there was something behind it, a flicker of pain, not just anger. Eli lowered his voice. "I'm not here to fight, ma'am. I just need water for my horse. Then I'll be gone." The woman's bow trembled, just slightly. Finally, she lowered it. "The river is down that path. Drink, but leave before the sun falls." He nodded. "You have my word." Her name, he later learned, was Iana, a word that meant, eternal blossom. But there was nothing gentle about her. She carried herself like someone who'd already lost too much and wasn't ready to lose more. When Eli returned the next day, it wasn't to stay, it was because he'd found something strange. Half the valley had been burned by lightning fire. The smoke rose like ghosts. He saw her again, standing in the ashes, trying to save what little was left, broken pottery, singed herbs, a few dying horses. Without asking, he dismounted and began to help. She stared at him. "I told you to leave." "I know," he said, pulling a charred log away from the flames. "But you look like you could use another pair of hands." "You don't understand," she said bitterly. "My people will kill you if they see you here. Then let's work fast." For hours, they fought the fire together. By sunset, the valley lay in ruins, but the horses were safe, and the small stream still ran clear. Eli looked at her hands, covered in soot, and said softly, "Sometimes the land gives you nothing until you prove you'll fight for it." Iana didn't reply, but for the first time, she didn't tell him to go. In the days that followed, Eli began rebuilding a broken corral nearby. He didn't ask for permission, and she didn't stop him. Sometimes she would watch from a distance, arms folded, a silent shadow against the light. When he cut his hand on a nail, she came forward without a word and wrapped it in a strip of leather. "You shouldn't help me," he said. "You shouldn't be here," she answered. They both smiled, though neither admitted why. One afternoon, he found her struggling with a heavy saddle by the river. She was trying to lift it onto a restless Mustang that kept sidestepping in protest. The sight made him grin. "You're fighting that thing all wrong," he called. She shot him a glare. "Then show me how a cowboy fights." He stepped beside her, guiding her hands on the leather strap. "Don't lift with your arms, use your legs. Keep your back straight." Together, they hoisted the saddle up, and it landed perfectly. She laughed, half surprised, half proud. "Maybe your way isn't useless after all." "Maybe," he said, meeting her eyes. "Or maybe we're both learning." For a moment, the noise of the river filled the silence between them. Sunlight caught her braid, and a soft wind moved through the reeds. Something in that quiet, something neither of them wanted to name, began to grow. That evening, Iana brought him to the edge of her village, hidden deep between the cliffs. "You'll leave by morning," she said firmly. "If they find you here, they won't ask questions." "I'll go," he said. "But tell me something first, why are you the only one still here?" Her eyes lowered. "Because I refused to marry the man they chose for me." The confession hung in the air like a storm about to break. "My father said a woman's place is beside the one her tribe selects," she said quietly. "But my place is beside the truth. And the truth is, I can't give myself to someone I don't believe in." Eli studied her, the fading sunlight painting fire across her face. "You're braver than any man I've met." She turned away. "Bravery has a cost." That night, Eli slept by the river. He dreamt of running horses, of thunder on the plains, and of a woman's voice saying, "The land only lets you stay if you earn it." When he woke, she was gone, but near his campfire lay a small carved token, shaped like a hawk in flight. He smiled faintly. Guess that's her way of saying see you again. He didn't know it yet, but that small sign meant far more. Because by breaking her tribe's rules and sparing his life, Ayana had already sealed both their fates. And somewhere in the hills, the sound of drums began to rise, the kind that warned of war. The morning rose clear and sharp, with a wind that smelled of smoke. Eli woke to find the sky bruised with red streaks, the color of warning. The token Ayana had left lay in his palm, and the horse beside him stamped nervously. Somewhere far off, drums rolled through the canyon like thunder wrapped in anger. He saddled up fast and rode toward the cliffs. The air was still except for the rhythmic pounding of hooves echoing from beyond the ridge. When he reached the top, he saw them, a line of riders sweeping across the plain, feathers glinting in the sun, dust rising around them. At their head rode a tall man with a scar across his cheek. Eli didn't need to ask who he was. That was Taza, the warrior Ayana had refused to marry. The tribe had returned to claim their own. Eli stayed hidden among the rocks until they passed. He saw Ayana walking beside the riders, her wrists bound loosely with rope. She didn't look afraid, only furious. When her gaze flicked up toward the ridge, for a heartbeat their eyes met. She didn't speak, but her stare told him everything. Don't follow. Not yet, but Eli Ward had never been good at following orders. By noon, he was back at the ranch, throwing supplies into a saddlebag, water, dried meat, a coil of rope, his rifle. The valley had given him something worth fighting for, and he wasn't going to let it burn again. He remembered her words, bravery has a cost. Well, he figured, every good thing does. He rode out before the sun began to fall, keeping to the shadows of the canyon. He could see the firelight from their camp flickering ahead, voices carried by the wind, chanting, angry, desperate. As he drew closer, he saw Ayana tied to a post near the center, her face lit by the flames. Taza stood before her, shouting words Eli couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. Betrayal, shame, punishment. Eli slid from his horse, heart hammering. He moved quietly through the brush, edging closer. Then he heard Ayana's voice cut through the noise like an arrow. I chose my own path, she said. I'd rather walk it alone than be chained to a coward who hides behind old laws. The camp fell silent. Even the fire seemed to lean closer to listen. Taza's face twisted. You speak like the white man now, he hissed. I speak like a free soul, she answered. He raised his spear. Eli didn't think. He burst from the shadows, shouting, that's enough. The tribe turned in shock. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos exploded. Eli dove forward, knocking Taza off balance. The spear clattered to the dirt. Ayana twisted her hands free from the half-burned ropes and grabbed a fallen torch. The two of them moved as one, Eli blocking, Ayana striking. The noise of shouting men filled the canyon. Ayana swung the torch low, scattering embers. This way, she yelled. They ran toward the river, the sound of pursuit thundering behind them. Bullets and arrows sliced the air. Eli grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a fallen log. You hurt? She shook her head. Not yet. They crawled along the riverbank until they reached the narrow gorge. The water was shallow, shining with moonlight even though the sun hadn't fully set. In there, Eli said. The current will hide our tracks. They waded in, half running, half stumbling through the freezing flow until the sounds of pursuit faded behind them. When they finally stopped, both were gasping, soaked to the bone. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Ayana whispered, you shouldn't have come. I tried staying away, he said, but that didn't feel right either. Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. You'll be hunted now. He smiled faintly. Then we'll run together. They followed the river north until dawn painted the cliffs gold again. When the land opened wide, they found a cave high above the valley and took shelter there. Eli lit a small fire, careful to keep the smoke thin. Ayana sat nearby, rubbing warmth back into her hands. You could have let them take me, she said. He shook his head. Couldn't. You gave me a reason to fight again. Guess I owed you something back. Ayana looked into the fire. My people won't stop. Taza will hunt us until one of us is gone. Eli leaned against the rock wall. Then we don't make it easy for him. We make him see what we're fighting for. She met his gaze. And what's that? The right to live free, he said simply. The right to start over. For the first time, she smiled, tired but real. Days turned into weeks. They built a small camp in the hills, living off what they could hunt and the few supplies Eli had brought. Ayanna taught him how to track by broken grass instead of footprints, how to listen to wine to find water. He taught her how to mend leather, how to calm a wild horse with a touch instead of a whip. Every day they worked side by side, and every night the firelight flickered between them like a heartbeat. They spoke little about the tribe or the town, but each knew the past was coming, step by step, down the trail behind them. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ayanna pointed to the far ridge. Smoke again. Eli's jaw tightened. They found the ranch. She placed a hand on his arm. We can't go back. I built that place with my hands, he said quietly. And you helped me save it. It's only wood, she said. He looked at her. No, it's what we made of it. The choice hung between them like a blade. Then Ayanna nodded. Then we fight for it. Dash dash dash. The next morning they rode down into the valley, side by side. The sun rose behind them, throwing their shadows long across the grass. When they reached the ranch, smoke curled from the roof, but the fire hadn't spread. 3 riders were there, searching through the barn. Taza wasn't among them, but his mark was carved into the door. Eli dismounted, rifle in hand. You take the left, he said. I'll draw them out. Ayanna gave him a look of warning but didn't argue. She melted into the tall grass, silent as wind. Eli stepped forward, calling. Out, you boys lost something. The riders spun, surprised. One fired, missing wide. Eli answered with a single clean shot, dropping him to the dirt. The others turned to flee, but Ayanna appeared behind them, bow drawn, her arrow landing square in the ground between their horses. Tell Taza, she said coldly, if he wants to finish this, he can come himself. The men galloped away, spooked. Eli lowered his rifle. You really do know how to stop trouble. She smiled faintly. Words weigh more than bullets, if you know how to use them. He laughed under his breath. I think I've heard that before. Dash dash dash. That night, they sat on the porch, watching the stars crawl out over the sky. The ranch smelled of smoke and dust, but it still stood. Eli leaned back in his chair, boots crossed, hat tilted low. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked. Ayanna shook her head. The land still breathes here. It forgives slow, but it forgives. He nodded. Guess that's good enough for me. For a while, silence stretched between them, comfortable, familiar. Then she spoke softly. You changed something in me, Eli Ward. He turned toward her. I could say the same. She smiled, eyes reflecting firelight. Maybe that's what the land wanted all along, not to be owned, but to be shared. He looked out over the dark fields, where the wind moved the grass like waves. Then we'll keep it safe. Together. Dash dash dash. Far in the distance, the faint sound of a drum echoed once more, slower now, not the beat of war, but of mourning, or maybe of peace. Ayanna listened, then closed her eyes. They'll come again, she whispered. Then we'll be ready, Eli said. The night breeze carried the scent of sage and the promise of rain. Above them, the stars burned clear and bright, watching over the 2 souls who had dared to fight the world just to stand side by side. And when the dawn came, spilling gold over the valley, it found them still there, 2 silhouettes against the rising sun, proof that sometimes courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to stay when everything tells you to run. The next few weeks were a fragile peace. The days stretched long, full of rebuilding and quiet talk, and though neither of them said it, both knew the silence before the storm never lasts forever. Ayanna still rose early, tending the horses while the sun was just a gold line across the sky. Eli fixed the fences and planted wild seed across the open ground, hoping the coming rain would bring the land back to life. It was a rhythm that felt almost like home, until one morning, they saw smoke again, darker and thicker than before, rising from the northern ridge. They're coming, Ayanna said simply. Eli wiped the sweat from his brow. Then we stand our ground. He could see the fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for what would be lost again. If we fight, there'll be no going back, she warned. He met her gaze. We already crossed that line when you untied me from that post. Ayanna didn't answer. She just nodded, and together they began to prepare. They filled water barrels, packed dried food, and set up a lookout near the ridge. The horses were restless, they sensed what was coming. When the sun began to dip, a single rider appeared in the distance, the wind catching the feathers in his hair like small fires. Taza had returned. Dash dash dash. He rode closer, slow and deliberate, until he was just a few yards from the porch. His voice was low, cold, and full of pride. You should have stayed gone, white man. Eli didn't move. I tried, but she wasn't done with me yet. Taza's glare shifted to Ayanna, who stood beside Eli, bow in hand. You shame your blood. You turned your back on your people. Ayanna's voice was calm. No, I turned my back on hate. The warrior's expression hardened. Then you will die with him. Before Eli could answer, Ayanna stepped forward. No, Taza, we'll live together, because this land doesn't belong to you, or me, or anyone. It belongs to whoever loves it enough to fight for it without destroying it. Taza's jaw tightened, but something flickered in his eyes, doubt, maybe pain. He dismounted slowly, gripping his spear. You've forgotten who you are. She met his gaze evenly. No, for the first time, I remember. The wind rose, carrying dust and leaves through the yard. For a heartbeat, everything stood still, the ranch, the sky, even the horses. Then Taza charged. Eli moved fast, diving aside as the spear struck the porch post and splintered. Ayanna loosed an arrow, not to kill, but to knock the weapon from his hands. It struck true, sending the spear spinning away. Taza turned with a roar, tackling Eli to the ground. The two men rolled in the dirt, fists flying, the sun blazing above them. Stay down, Eli growled, trying to pin him. Never. Taza spat, landing a heavy blow. Eli staggered back, blood on his lip, but his eyes burned steady. You fight like you've already lost. Taza swung again, and stopped. The sound of horses filled the air. From the ridge, figures appeared, not enemies, but the elders of Ayanna's tribe, drawn by the smoke and noise. They watched silently as the three stood frozen in the yard, panting, bruised, and broken by pride. Ayanna lowered her bow. Let it end, Taza. Look around you, there's nothing left to burn. The old chief, his voice rough as gravel, spoke for the first time. The spirits are tired of your anger, Taza. You bring only fire, not peace. Taza's shoulders slumped. For a moment, he looked like the boy he once was, lost, proud, and hurting. Then, wordlessly, he turned, mounted his horse, and rode away into the red light of sunset. The elders nodded once to Ayanna and Eli. The land is wide, the old man said. If it lets you stay, then you have earned it. And with that, they too rode off, leaving only the whisper of hooves fading into the wind. When the silence returned, Eli dropped to the porch steps, exhausted. Guess that's over, he muttered. Ayanna smiled faintly, kneeling beside him. Nothing's ever over, but maybe, it's beginning. He looked at her, and for a moment, all the miles of hurt and fear they'd carried seemed to fall away. You ever think you'd see this day? She shook her head. I never thought I'd find someone who'd fight for it with me. He smiled, slow and warm. Well, guess I finally found a place that lets me stay. She laughed softly, the sound carried across the valley like music. That night, the stars came out brighter than they had in months. The ranch stood quiet but alive, fences mended, horses grazing, firelight glowing through the windows. The land had been tested, the people too, and both had survived. As Ayanna stood on the porch, Eli joined her, wrapping a worn blanket around her shoulders. You still think the land can't be owned? He asked. She looked out at the plains, silver under moonlight. It can't, she said. But it can love you back, if you treat it right. He nodded. Then I reckon we'll make it proud. They stood together, watching the horizon. Somewhere beyond the hills, the river they'd saved still flowed, catching the starlight. And for the first time in years, Eli Ward felt what he'd been chasing all along, not just peace, but belonging. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying a promise older than both of them, a promise of forgiveness, of freedom, and of love that no law could bind.